All right, how's everybody doing? Good. Well, that's awesome. I'm going to do my best not to talk for a full hour because that's painful. And I've been told that these chairs are incredibly comfortable. So like I said, I'll try not to talk for the full hour. Yeah. Okay. Is this better? Perfect. All right. So I'll give you a little bit of an introduction. My name is John Platais. I run the AI-Ops division for FIS. Most people don't know who FIS is, but I like to sum it up that if you use a credit card, you buy stock, you make a bank transfer, even though it may be your bank, it runs through our systems. So we are the largest fintech company in the world. We process trillions of transactions a day, all across the globe. So as you can imagine, solid operations and now operations that are mindful of security are kind of important to us. So over the course of the next, like I said, however long it takes me to talk about it, I'm going to kind of go through some of the AI implications as they relate to security operations. Now, I'm going to do my best not to impart my own bias, and I'm going to fail miserably, but I'm going to try it anyway. When you think about artificial intelligence, machine learning, data science, the reality is that everybody wants it. All C-level executives think they need it, but they don't really know yet what they need or what they want. They need it. And we run into a lot of that. In fact, 2 weeks ago, I spent 4 days in Florida at the Gartner conference. The entire conference revolved around generative AI. ChatGPT, Bard, large language models, Llama, Llama 2, etc. And in the audience were all of these C-level people, CISOs, CEOs, CIOs, CTOs, and they were pumped. I mean, Gartner's good. They got these people riled up to the point where they went home the following Monday, showed up, turned to their people and says, why don't we have this now? I want it now, and I want you to deliver it. Okay, so that's the general mindset. So I'm going to, again, do my best not to pepper in my own opinion here, but again, I'll fail miserably, so there you go. So I'm going to kind of go through a little bit of an overview. I'll try and make that relatively quick, talking about how we're using AI in security today versus how we hope to do it in the future. Looking at the different technologies that are available in security operations, some use cases, and my favorite part is those key considerations. Okay, so I like to make this interactive. I will save time at the end for questions, but if you've got some compelling question that you just simply can't get, and you need to do one of those Arnold Horshack type things, I just dated myself. Most of you don't know what I'm talking about. Okay, if you got to do that, then feel free. All right, so just to give you a little bit of context in terms of how we're using AI today. And maybe it'll help if I kind of describe what I do on a daily basis. My team's job is to do just this. We integrate artificial intelligence, machine learning, data science, and ultimately intelligence-driven automation into daily operations, targeting a zero-touch operational environment. Idea being is if that I can train a machine to fix it, well then the machine should just go fix it, versus all of the other procedures and processes that we do today that can increase mean time to resolution, drive down customer satisfaction, etc. So if you look at some of the key trends in AI, Capgemini says that 69% of organizations acknowledge that they need it. And that brings me back to my very first statement. Okay, 70% of organizations say, I need this. That doesn't mean 70% of organizations know what they're going to do with it when they get it. They just know they need it. And they're right. They absolutely need it. You will not compete because everybody else thinks they need it also. 75% of organizations, according to Gartner, security organizations will have their own subset AI team dedicated to AI integration into SecOps. Okay, when you think about SecOps today, is there anybody in here in security operations? Okay, cool. Anybody in here in security in general? All right, well, that's better. You're in SecOps whether you know it or not. Okay, so ultimately, you've got all of these organizations that are starting to look at how do they use their data, right? Because most security organizations, they're very tool-driven. Okay, if you're doing anything that's at scale, I'm talking about hundreds of thousands of systems across the globe. Okay, it's not a bunch of cool nerds in the corner trying to hack their stuff. It's multi-million-dollar agreements with large vendors doing scans and access, evaluations all across the environment, generating upwards of, one example I had is 27 terabytes of data per day. The person who at the time was a chief information officer just bluntly said to me, what on earth am I going to do with 27 terabytes of data a day? It's like, I can't even store it, much less try and use it. Okay, so ultimately it comes down to the idea that we're going to use intelligence to try and bring some order to the chaos of 27 terabytes. So I know this is a bit of a seeing eye chart. I'm not going to read off the slide, but I want to level set so that we all kind of go into the remainder of the discussion on the same page. Okay, so ultimately, the mindset here is that we're going to use more and more intelligence, more and more AI, and it always bugs me because those terms all get used interchangeably, and they're really not. All right, that's a totally different discussion. Anyhow, so we're going to look at that. We're going to look at different learning systems. The idea is that a traditional data science model, I'll ask, is anybody in here a data scientist? All right. Well, aren't we all? The traditional data science model is relatively rigid. It's very academic, right? You have a use case, you check the data, you clean the data, you build your model, you test your model, you productionize your model, you maintain it, you go to the next one. I don't know about you guys, but my company won't wait for that. That takes way too long. And should you dare to prove the null hypothesis at the end, in other words, prove that, no, it's not related, oh, then what have you been doing for the last 3 months? Okay, so the idea is that we need to leverage learning systems better than the more traditional data science model. Why do we do that? Because it frees up human time. Again, I'm making some assumptions here, but one assumption is that you've all troubleshoot, or at some point troubleshot a problem that was impacting production. Okay? This lady right here is rolling her eyes. Do you do that all day? Pretty much? Got it. So you're sitting there, you're probably on a bridge call with 48 other people. All those 48 other people who aren't doing anything else right now are sitting there listening, and as they bring in more people, they retell the same problem, and then that person says, no, I don't know what that is, and they leave and they try somebody else. Okay? A lot of wasted time. In fact, they estimate today that a standard outage, an unintended outage in a tech company costs $300,000 an hour. I think that's a bit of an exaggeration, but I guess if you look at all tech companies and you take the average, yeah, right, that's possible. More closely, they estimate that it's $1,667 a minute is what that outage costs. Okay? So the idea, again, all my Gartner participants who went home the next day are saying, we can't do this anymore. We need AI and we need automation. How come I don't have it yet? So in order to deliver it, when that person comes and asks you the same question, you kind of have to be mindful of some of the tools that are available and some of the key terminology. Okay, and this comes back to my earlier comment about a little bit of bias. Okay, the idea that everything is AI is just wrong. Okay, the concept of AI, artificial intelligence, the singularity, if you want to think of it that way, the notion of a machine that can learn and grow on its own, even with the marvel of things like ChatGPT, I don't think we're quite there yet. But we like to use the phrase. More appropriately, you're probably going to incorporate machine learning. You're going to implement trained models, pre-trained models against large data sets in order to get insights that come out of it. Particularly for security, you've got natural language processing when you think about, scouring, at some level, personal communications between employees, not that anyone does that. You think about looking at notes for incidents, closed tickets, trying to compare inputs from multiple different tools that have their own proprietary nomenclature about what a problem should be called, and putting that all together, that all requires natural language processing. Because when you give a person 50 documents and says, go through it and give me the highlights of the similarities between them, that takes a long time. And that document doesn't even need to be a book. It can be as simple as, this problem has happened 15 times, go look at all the closed notes and tell me what we should do. That takes forever. Other pieces that are specifically security relevant, and more as we go, is image and video analysis. I mean, the ability to take surveillance footage and identify potential threats based on whatever category you choose to do. The image on the right is created exclusively from AI. That one I deliberately said make it robotic, but how far away is it from making it look just like you or me and using it in a way I don't want it used? Behavioral analytics, taking a look at how we identify different behavior, login behavior, surfing behavior, traffic patterns that change over time that may be indicative of some form of attack. Right now, all we know is that all of a sudden stuff got slower. We send in an expert and he says, look, we have more packets coming in than we anticipated. Okay? What if we could do that automatically? And then, of course, there's threat intelligence. Really being able to take the patterns of known attacks and not wait for the attack to occur, because very rarely does it occur because of one particular item. It's a sequence of 3, 4, 5 different things. Well, what if we could alert people at number 3 before it gets to 4 and 5? And say to my amateur data scientist right here, look, 3 of these 5 things have already happened. The propensity of the next one occurring is 94%. Well, go do something. Okay? These are the types of things that AI does make available today that you can leverage once you get that subset of guys or girls and anybody in that group that your security team is going to pay for. So I'll give you a couple examples. And these are ones that my team has used generically in the past, and we've kind of tweaked them from the perspective of security. Ultimately, anomaly detection is probably the most frequent, and at the same time, probably one of the most readily available for you to implement in your environment. Okay? Anomaly detection ultimately means you've established a baseline of normal behavior, and you've trained a model to look for anything that deviates from that normal behavior by a certain amount. Okay, so from a network perspective, you know that you receive so many transactions for this particular application per hour. And within the last 15 minutes, the expected baseline has gone up 17%. Is it a problem? Well, maybe not. Maybe you have more customers automatically. Probably not. It's probably something different. Okay, so in this case, it comes down to collecting that user behavior. establishing that baseline, and then ultimately, once you've determined that this is a potential threat, creating those alerts. Today, it's done very different, right? You just get a ton of alerts, and a ton, and they call you and say, what's going on? And all you know is you just got a ton of alerts. So being able to go through that in an automated way is definitely an advantage. And the truth is that as you go into larger operations, they're doing the same thing. Okay, so we can't think of this as a nice to have anymore, because every one of your competitors is also thinking about this and is also doing it. And the truth is that whoever gets there first is going to win, at least for the short term. Fraud detection, extremely common when it comes to AI. People have been using fraud detection in transactions for years. But again, it comes down to starting with the data. In every case, it's going to start with the data. And just like our traditional data scientists, the data is going to need to be clean and it's going to need to be usable. Then you identify the relevant data. And then once you've done that, you can train your models. All of these things come with risks. And that's the problem, because I'll share an interesting fact. In my previous life, I was a middle school history teacher. Loved it. Loved every minute of it. It was never the kids. The kids were awesome. Then I became a principal. Still wasn't the kids. The kids were awesome. Well, then it was the staff. Okay. And then, of course, I moved into the IT space, and then over time and a whole, many drinks worth of discussion later, I do this for a living. But point being is that the human brain, just like AI, works roughly the same way. Okay? When you have a child, how many people are parents? Okay, awesome. You notice they put everything in their mouth, like immediately. It's on purpose. They estimate that you as a human being, by the point you're 3 years old, have learned 90% of everything you'll ever learn in your life. That means from 3 to now, it's all just been gravy. Okay? But you notice they put things in their mouth. There's round things that taste good and taste bad. Fuzzy round things that taste good and taste bad. Green fuzzy round things that taste good and taste bad. They build schema, relationships in your brain. AI does the same thing. It builds relationships, and some relationships are more interesting than others. Put your finger in the light socket, it's going to feel bad. That's an important relationship. Okay, far more important than green fuzzy things that don't taste good. So we need to keep in mind that it takes time for AI to get good. Okay, it takes time for it to build these schema so that your output is actually valuable. The examples that I've shared with you, they don't just work. In fact, the initial implementation is usually pretty rough because you have experts there with you going, that's not right. Your model says this, even I know that, that's not right. It takes time, and that's something that people aren't prepared for. So keep that in mind as you explore these things in your organizations. This is my favorite slide. This is the history teacher in me. The interesting thing about AI, machine learning, and data science is that we as a society have gone from crawl to walk to I want a Harley. And we skipped everything in between because of great inventions like ChatGPT and other items. So we need to keep in mind that the human condition has not ignored this over the years. All right? And it starts here, of course, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. If you weren't aware, it was a criticism against new medical practices at the turn of the century. The idea that new medicine and surgeries were going to create mutated abominations. Well, thankfully, they're wrong. I mean, I've had a few surgeries in my time, and thank goodness we can do it. You look at that list and you keep going down, and every generation, every decade, we continue to look back at where do machines fit in our lives. You know, my personal favorites on the right include Tron, just because I'm, that old that I actually saw Tron in a theater. You know, you've got the Terminator up there. My team and I are building a product right now that is a centralized ecosystem for machine learning. And I've actually had people refer to it as Skynet, which, at first I thought was, well, that's pretty cool. Yeah, I don't know. As we look at now the new powers of generative AI, you have to start to think to yourself, how long does it take an intelligent machine to figure out that people really aren't very good for this planet? All of it coming down to, again, my favorite phrase of shall we play a game? Ultimately, it's a risk, and there are risks that come with integrating AI into your operations. You have to decide, is the risk of having it more or less than the risk of not? So then it comes to the challenges. And these are things that you, if you choose to become an implementer of these technologies, you have to be ready for, okay? Because they're going to drive people within your organization crazy. And the first one is bias. Data and data science are in and of themselves not bias. It's just the data, and it's what the math says the data says. But the data itself can be. I mean, let's just think of some very common examples. Let's study the current population of American prisons to identify who is more at risk of being incarcerated at some point in their life. Okay, it's going to be totally socially, economically biased. Okay, it's not race, it's not gender, it's primarily money. Who has it and who doesn't? Okay, but the model doesn't know that. It doesn't care. The math is quite certain. There is a good profile for somebody most likely to spend a certain amount of time in prison. There's privacy. We haven't even thought of what real private information is. Non-public information, that's relatively simple. We've made a list. Social security numbers, mother's maiden name. You can go down the list. This is known universally as non-public information. But what happens when you can throw the power of something like, the model behind ChatGPT at all the data? We can create new non-public information. Composite keys of characteristics for people that uniquely identify you based on what you watch, what you eat, what your medical records are, combined with your hair color and your shoe size. Things we haven't even thought of all of a sudden become private information. Transparency is huge. Most of this stuff is black box. Even the stuff that isn't black box, yeah, go ahead, figure out the math. Good luck. A lot of this you don't know. Most Bayesian models, and you don't even need to know what that means, are relatively black box. If you purchase Watson X from IBM, and I think it's a tremendous product, there's portions in it that you don't know how it came to the conclusion the model just told you. The transparency all of a sudden becomes a problem. Security. What happens when somebody figures out to hack that thing? Wow. Change a paradigm. What makes large language models interesting is that they use, in some cases, billions of parameters. It's not particularly magical. My friend and I here, who are amateur data scientists, we build models that have maybe dozens of parameters. But what if you could build one that has billions of them? That's what those large language models do. Okay? What happens when you can alter that? Or change it? Or impact it after it's become critical to many businesses? Autonomy. This one is interesting. When ChatGPT was first released, within the first couple of months, there was a group of people that, for lack of a better word, tried to irritate it. Tried to ask it things that you shouldn't ask it. And its initial responses were quite brutal. Like, don't mess with me. I'll find out where you live. To the point where they had to build in some safeguards. Okay? Now, the truth is the machine isn't doing that. The machine is basing it on how many other people would have reacted. What if you could take the human reaction to I'm going to get you across the globe in a large language model? The response is not nice. I'm going to get you. Oh, yeah. Come at me. See what happens. Machines will have the ability to make autonomous decisions. That's what you bought it for. To make decisions so you don't have to. Will it make the right one? And what happens when it doesn't is going to be the question that you have to think of when you develop your own implementation. And then, of course, there's informed consent. At what point is my right to choose taken away by these large language models? What if I don't want my data in there? Now all of a sudden that informed consent that we often give away so easily, like accept all cookies. How many of you really go through them? Do you? Oh, you're my hero, man. Yeah, I don't. I accept all cookies. I do it on a virtual machine, which I nuke afterward, but I still usually accept all cookies. So what happens when that informed consent now gets used for things that I never thought of or hoped it would be? So, and again, I said I'm going to try not to talk through this whole thing, but there's a new consideration beginning in November of 2022. Before November of 2022, this was all relatively benign in the fact that even bad models, don't use that model. Okay, but now the world has become accustomed to having artificial intelligence at their fingertips. I'll share an interesting fact that, in my free time, I'm taking a grad class because I thought, geez, maybe I should do that. And in this grad class, different people create different presentations and they all share them online and you critique each other's stuff. There are certain characteristics to a ChatGPT output, to a prompt, that are noticeable. How they'll truncate a sentence to make it not a sentence and start with a keyword, a colon, and then some descriptor. Okay, it happens all the time. And you start to look at other people's input into these activities and you start to question, how much of that did you write and how much did you plug into a large language model that gave you an output? They're starting to create companies now that actually will scrutinize your text and give you the percentage that the company believes was written by AI and how much was written by humans. I don't think they're very good at it because I plugged some of my stuff in it and apparently I'm a robot. But it's not like they're going to stop. Over time, those will get better and better. But some of the interesting things now that we have generative AI, and again, I hope I'm not boring you with what the difference is. So when you think about generative AI, you're thinking about the computer creating something unique and new from existing information. Beforehand, AI, I'm going to stop using the term, machine learning and data science created an anticipated response that was informed by data. But now it can create new stuff. All of those pictures on the right-hand side were created from generative AI. Those people don't exist. And of course, I can spot, I look at that, I'm like, all right, that's not a photo. But how long before it is? So we need to start thinking about and being prepared for some of the things that come with this new gift to society. And the gift is not free. One statistic suggests that to retrain ChatGPT 4's model, it takes as much power as it takes to run a mid-sized town for a day. Okay, so let's not be too concerned that, some basement dweller with 4 GPUs is going to create the new ChatGPT. But at the same time, they can create something that, is the third grade equivalent. And part of that comes with deep fakes. The ability to augment information and use that in a way that wasn't originally intended. I would be shocked that some 16-year-old kid has yet to try to make a fake ID with generative AI. I would have. Okay? Cool. That brings us to synthetic identity fraud. How hard is it now to create a person? Not a person physically, like weird science, but a human record. How hard? Data poisoning. Again, it comes back to the idea of, using AI to alter and make other AI confused or malicious. For instance, the other day I just tried it. I said to Bard, write me some code to conduct a SQL injection attack against I forgot how I phrased it, a lamp stack, something along those lines. Luckily, it says, I'm sorry, I can't help you with that. But if you know portions of the code or how the code should be structured, I have my developers throw their code ideas into ChatGPT all the time. Why should you waste time replacing boilerplate code? Ask them how to build a React component, using this and that parameter, and then just fix it. Content spamming, fake reviews. How hard is it now to bolster your LinkedIn profile or Facebook? Create 5,000 reviews that say you're just the greatest security professional on the planet, and anyone would be brilliant to have you on staff. You can do that now relatively quickly. Yeah, inversion attacks. Again, it's pointing one form of AI at another and seeing if it can break it. But still, if it's part of your production environment, that too becomes a problem over time. So, in the end, just because I don't want you to just take my word for it, I've added a couple resources. I believe SecretCon will put this on their website. But these are the ones, at least in my opinion, I've found to be the most beneficial in terms of how do you really implement this successfully and safely in your security operations. So, all right. So I'm going to open up the questions. Please feel free. I probably won't know the answer to everything, but if I do know the answer, I'll certainly tell you. If not, I could make something up, but you'd probably figure it out. Any questions? Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a great question. And if you didn't hear it, the question is that if we make the premise that AI is in an infancy state and you implement your company and it's in this infancy state, how long before it's not an infant anymore? There's a couple products on the market right now that claim to have solved things like AI-Ops, et cetera. And I asked them the same exact question because it's a bit of an unknown. When is good enough good enough? But the general consensus for companies that have been doing this for some time is that it takes 9 to 12 months before the models you've implemented should be acted upon. They can be advisory up until that point. But if you're really going to let your model then trigger automation to augment your system, that's going to take between 9 and 12 months of training, as well as recursive learning. That feedback loop is critical, okay? Because the model thinks it's right, okay? There's many ways to check the statistical accuracy of a model, okay? But the model doesn't know what the person knows. So if you are going to do this, that feedback loop from the people that are going to use the information is going to be critical. And it's actually, it can take that 9 to 12 months if it's an effective loop mechanism and cut that down to 3 months to 6 months. But it is human labor intensive. Somebody has to go back and check it. And that can be very hard to implement in your environments. Other questions? Yeah. So I'm going to repeat it back. You tell me if I got it right. So the question is, how long do you think it takes a company to build and implement a learning system where it's going to eventually benefit the business? Oh, okay. So what are the resources needed just to get started? Oh, okay. To be successful. I'm going to give you what I believe to be the right answer. And it's an answer that most techies don't like. I don't like it. But the right answer is that up front, you need to build your philosophy of AI. Okay? You need to have an agreement of what you will allow it to do and what you won't allow it to do so that you can move forward from there. You know, because what happens with a lot, and again, I'm just as big a culprit, is like you get a new toy, right? You want to get in and build some stuff and use it. But before you actually get it into your production environment, you need those guidelines and that regulation. So once you have that, then the next step is really establishing a group of people that can understand the multiple components of it. And understand is probably not the perfect word because it's not beyond anyone. It's just there's certain skills that you need. You know, and that comes down to having a proficient data engineering group, which is separate from the data science group. Okay, because ultimately you have to transport, you have to normalize, maintain, and support the data, because that's where it's got to come from. You know, people like to start with the data science side, because that's the cool side. You know, building the model is the neat part. But, you know, most people that jump to that are in that spectrum of companies that fail to do this. In fact, Gartner suggests last year in 2023 that approximately, and I'm saying approximately because I don't remember the exact number, but it was a very low number, in CTO organizations, less than 10% will actually implement an effective productionalized AI project. Okay, a lot plan on it. A lot will budget it, and a lot will even pursue it. But when we talk about actually implementing it, the number that actually gain value is very, very low at this point. Because it takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of companies don't have a readily available staff of people that do this for a living. And I know that because I don't. I had to build my team from scratch, and it started with a bunch of idealistic nerds in a corner who quickly realized we could do this, but not alone. And we had to bring in our data engineers. We had to bring in, you know, our data analysts, our business analysts to understand the use cases. And then and only then can you really do any sort of data science. So, you know, think about it from the perspective of the traditional data science model really hasn't changed. You know, you still need to understand the business problem. You still need to retain, clean, and support the data, and then and only then can you really build the model. So if you think about the people to do that, that really hasn't changed. It still has to come in that order. Mm-hmm. So again, to repeat that, I mean, ultimately the question is all these people are trying it, why do so few of them actually succeed? I'm going to give you my opinion because, and I think it's an educated opinion, but I'm sure there's outliers and there's other ways to look at it. But really, it comes down to the fact that people are companies that I've seen that have tried to implement their program and not have it succeed is because they tried to build something before they knew what they needed. And so you went down a pathway, and you went down this pathway and you incorporated, my product alone that my team builds incorporates 15 different technologies to process 1 million data points a minute. Okay? That's cool. But if I didn't start the project mindful of the end state and what we were trying to accomplish, then in the end, it will be yet one more skunkworks project that sits on a shelf in the back corner that was cool, but we didn't really know what to do with it, so we went on with our day. When I've talked to other people that do similar work, that has seemed to be the consistent answer. We want AI, we're being pushed to use AI, but we're buying it and using it before we really know what we're hoping to accomplish. Other questions? I hope that answers your question. Okay. All right. Oh, please. Say that one more time. I think I know what you said, but do it again. I would probably say that we're there. I mean, I don't know if it's, I don't even know if people know how to admit it yet, but I would wager that just about everything that's made popularly and publicly available is somehow tempered with output from generative AI. Now, hopefully it's purely for factual features, but if I'm understanding your question is how long do we start to shape the way we view the world based on what generative AI outputs? I mean, is it kind of the umbrella?
More of a user base, like if I want to run generative AI in a specific way, I want to be a persona and I want to program it, exactly whether it's malicious or kind or like I can program it. Basically, there's an open loop of webmaster that kind of captures this where they're able to make their own generative AI to be what they want. I don't see us anywhere doing that.
I don't even think he's in here. Mike Getzman is the guy that runs this conference. Ask him to show you his virtual assistant on his phone. I won't spoil it, but in essence, he took a generative AI application and gave it very specific parameters on how to answer his questions. So I don't think it's perfect. I don't think I think it's got a long way to go, but I think that it's there. I mean, you can use it. Question is, what's the ultimate end state? Right now it's just kind of neat, maybe even a little funny. But at what point does it begin to augment the need to have other people around you? I mean, if you saw the latest Blade Runner, I think it was, I don't even remember the date to it. Blade Runner 2020, was that what it was? 2020, whatever. Okay, that's what he had. He had a completely customized virtual wife, eliminating the need for a real one, I guess. Did you have a question?
What was your biggest takeaway from the Gartner conference?
Honestly, it freaked me out a little bit. Because, and I hope I conveyed it, and again, it comes back to my analogy of walk, crawl, and now I want a Harley. That's kind of how AI has progressed in terms of its general availability to people. And when companies are now, like, if you didn't leave Gartner as a CIO and if you didn't call your leaders together on Monday morning, well, maybe you wasted the money on the ticket, because the whole thing was about using generative AI to augment, improve your business, both from a functional perspective as well as a competitive state. And that means we're going to get a lot of people trying to use something that right now Gartner has what's called a hype scale, right? So generative AI is at the top. And then it falls, and some of those guys like to call it like the pit of disillusionment. You know, where you try and implement it. Oh, this is so cool. Look what we got. And all of a sudden, dang, this is hard. And it doesn't work. And it gives me bad results. And it tells me that my dog is ugly. I mean, what is this thing? You know, so, I mean, we're headed to that. And I'm hoping that all those people that left understand that. Because if you went beyond Gartner has all their talks, but then it has the giant vendor booths. There wasn't a booth there that didn't have AI splattered all over it. And, you know, I'm kind of a nerd at heart, as well as, maybe a little mischievous at times. So, of course, I went and asked them, well, what are you doing? How's your model? Of course, everybody's going, well, we're using generative AI. And I said, show me what you're using. And this one guy was a human resource application where a person can put in whatever question they have about company policy and human resources, and it'll get back, the answer in a very human response. And of course, my response was, well, how many documents did you train this model on? Well, ultimately spit out, it was about 800. I'm like, okay, that's cool, but that's not to the scope of what we're talking about. We're talking about millions of documents and the ability to process them ethically and responsibly. So yeah, to the point to your question, excited and equally as kind of nervous because people are going to do some potentially destructive things with it, things that are just don't know any better because we did jump both feet right into it. I think it's going to be interesting to see what some of the backlash is and some of the fallout is. Okay, I am close to my time. Mr. Getzman in the back. Everyone wants to see your virtual assistant, by the way. So any other questions? Otherwise, I'll leave it at that. I think the slides will go up. And other than that, I'll be around for a while. Feel free to ask questions, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.